And 3, 2, 1. It says we are live in the top left-hand corner of my screen. So I'm hoping we are live on LinkedIn Airways, and people are listening. So if you are tuning in while you're here, just let us know that we are live and that you can hear us and you can see us. I usually check on my mobile phone just to see if it's kicked in and it started, and it looks like it's about to start. So I'm hoping that we're all here. So thanks very much for tuning in. This is the first one of 2026. And I'm joined by the awesome Andrew Hall and Mike Gale, who I will let them introduce themselves very shortly. But today's session is all about how do we start to reimagine people, process, and technology in the contact center. And I've had loads of conversations recently about what does the contact center of, strange, 2029. I don't know where 2029 is coming from, but people keep talking about what will it look like in 2029. I'm like, I started to round up saying, what will it look like in 2030? But we're going to have some of that debate and some of that discussion today as part of this conversation. We've got two awesome people to help us have that debate and have that discussion. So I'm going to hand to them first. And I'm going to come to Andrew, who has been a previous resident of the Contact Center Network back in 2022. And we welcome him back. So I'll let you reintroduce yourselves for those that didn't catch the 2022 episode, and just give them a little bit of an update on what you've been doing and why you're here.
Thanks, Gary. It's lovely to be here. So Andrew Hall, I now run a company called Offensa, which I'll mention in a minute. But before that, I have a mixed background of technology and operations. And I'm a little bit of a technologist as well as a career salesperson. So for the last 3.5 years prior to starting my business, I was the chief commercial officer for a company called Contac, really looking and steering the company in terms of both market growth, but also a lot of the strategy around how we and what we sell. In particular, then really refocusing the business towards a mindset of AI first. And so I spent the last 3.5, 4 years focused on introducing initially Gen AI when that was in the early stages, but very early on introducing agentic as well when it was first into the market, and successfully putting that into a number of accounts. And then I started my own business just about 6 months ago now, after leaving Contac. Prior to doing Contac, I was head of all things customer technology and customer strategy from a reference architecture point of view, including things like CCAS and other tools within Capgemini. So I have a bit of a tech outsourcing, customer operations, sales kind of mix, which has served well coming into Offensa, where we're really focused on working with organizations, both in developing software, but also helping them to break through a lot of the noise and a lot of the constraints that are in the businesses today that are holding people back from achieving what can be done with technology like agentic, if they were to actually get through the noise and be able to take a breath and a pause.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point around cutting through the noise and taking a pause before you leap in. So we'll dig into that in a little bit more detail. But before we do that, Mike, give yourself an intro and tell a little bit about the audience, a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Gary. So Mike Gale, I'm from Acacia Consultants. Similar to Andrew, been in the industry for a long time, so around 25 years. I've sort of come from the delivery and services background, been across a lot of the major players and vendors out in the market. So I've seen a lot of things, and sort of a lot of technology. And sort of similar to Andrew, I started my own company up the end of last year, really to sort of, let's say, change the pace, change the actual culture, trying to actually become a bit of a disruptor to the actual industry, to the point of where trying to get things done right. Not just because you can do something with technology, you've got to look at it actually taking it back to the ground up and rebuild that foundations up correctly as you go forward, especially with all the new capabilities out there. So, sort of coming out of lots of last vendor, Zoom last year, and seeing where the technologies had got to. There's a lot of good technology functionalities in the market, and that, myself and Andrew have talked, and what Andrew's doing is amazing as well in the background there. So yeah, really for me, it's been sort of 25 years of delivery, now trying to make sure that I can pass that knowledge on to a broader customer base with my own consultancy company.
Brilliant. So I think we've got two very awesome people to have a really interesting discussion about how we start to reimagine things across all of the different spectrums of people, process, and technology. But as ever with these sessions, we want anybody who's watching to participate as well. So if you do have a question for the panel, or you have a pearl or an insight that you want to share, if you drop it into the comments on LinkedIn, that will allow me to surface that comment a little bit like this. So if you've got a really tough question for either Andrew or Mike, feel free to drop it in, and I will put it to the panel. Might even have my own two-penny thing too, but if it's really difficult, I'll just leave it for Mike and Andrew. But first of all, I'd say, where is everybody dialing in from? So if you are tuning in, let us know where you're dialing in from. I think we've got the furthest so far on the panel. So Andrew, where are you tuning in from?
I live in the Algarve in the south of Portugal.
Okay, so we've got to beat Portugal as a step. Mike, I'm sensing you in the
it's not as glamorous as that, but Bedfordshire, again, it's probably about the same temperature. Never, but it's very, very. The beach is lovely in Bedfordshire.
Yeah, the Bedford Guard. and I'm tuning in.
They're sometimes called floods, I think, at the moment, Mike, aren't they?
It's very much is the flood basis. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if anybody's watching, the furthest distance you've got to compete with is Portugal in the Algarve. So let's dive into some of the meat of today's discussion. And I kind of wanted to start off with, given that we're going down the whole reimagination route here, team, I wanted to kind of get, I suppose, an idea of some of the things and some of the baggage that maybe we have to leave behind in order to really start to kind of reimagine what good could look like. So if I was to ask you guys, if there was a banned phrase that we wanted to approach for 2026 in the "we've always done it this way" version, what would be the first contact center practice you'd maybe challenge or ask people to stop altogether in 2026 to kind of get people into that new way of thinking? And Mike, I'm going to start with you on this. Oh, we've already beat you, Andrew. We've got Tampa, Florida.
Oh, I was about to say, I've seen Florida come up. Yeah. It's a really interesting question. All right. And it's one thing that I think all consultants, every vendor would love to hear that people would say, all right, is that we're going to stop doing what we're doing, because it breaks that autopilot, that cultural autopilot thinking, e.g. we're always doing it this way, we're just going to continue to do it, and all we're going to do is replace like for like. But it's not really what stops, it's what starts. And I think the way of looking at it is it starts thinking differently, and it's actually, it's not reinventing, right? It's it's even reimagine. It's starting those foundations again. If you could scratch everything out, how would you construct it? And that's not just the technology, all right? And I think this is where we're coming from, and sort of, I think it leads into Andrew's bit very well. CX isn't always about your customer relationship. It actually starts basis on how that process of the organization operate. Do your processes actually support it? Do they actually even work in the contact center? So not stopping, but actually starting and start thinking, break that sort of Borg thinker logic, the collective thinking of where you've come from, start again. That would be the best thing to go with that. But if you could start is stop using terms like for like, all right, in technology, or we've done it that way, or we have to do it this because of the process, or we need to get rid of headcount, or we're worried about these KPIs. These things are toxic within the actual growth and transformation of any contact center or any CX experience as we go. So starting at the ground and trying to build it up again would be the very first thing that you'd want to do. And then actually look at the technology.
Yeah. You know what? I went through an exercise in my career of zero-based budgeting, which was to say, right, do you need that same budget for next year? And if you do, what do you need it for, and what's it going to deliver? I think sometimes if we take that approach within contact center processes and technology and say, right, actually, what got you here today isn't necessarily going to get you to the next level. So how do we start to kind of build up from that zero base when we know what ground level actually looks like? Andrew, taking into account some of the stuff that Mike said there, is there anything that's on your banned list for 2026 that you think people need to knock out?
I think that something people need to introduce, I think they need to knock out disbelief. So I think that disbelief is holding back the potential, but I don't blame them for disbelief. I think disbelieving is because there's so much, and I use the term noise a lot in what I do. I think we're bombarded with noise. I think in a contact center, I was with someone in an airline recently who turned off their LinkedIn because of the amount of noise they were getting from software vendors and from consultants saying they could solve the problems.
I'll apologize in advance for
that. And it's not saying that they can't be valuable, but it's saying that I think what it does is constrain people's thinking. And I think right now where we are, we need to remove constraints, and we need to allow people that time to be able to think clearly about what they could do differently. Because the challenge in our industry right now, having worked in it for so many years, is that when you have demand failures that occur upstream in the contact center, we pick up a way of dealing with those, but the demand failures often don't get fixed. They get fixed in a perceived way by sorting it in the contact center, when actually it should never be there at all. A lot of the outsourcing work that goes off around the world is there because it's convenient just to get rid of it and forget about it. But actually, it doesn't ever fix the problem. The problem still exists. And so you end up with a problem on a problem on a problem. So I think people need to start to believe that they can truly fix the problems, because now with the technology that's available to us and with the ability to be able to reimagine, and I do use that term, reimagine, how it could look, we can change the industry, and it can change so radically that people will be blown away by what can be done.
Absolutely.
I think that's a really good point around the sort of, contact centers actually only fixing other problems that have been generated through the organization, and it's actually how can data drive and understand, so what you actually gain from those contact centers based on those interactions, fixing the actual problem, the underlying problem. Why are they actually contacting us? Why are we not fixing that problem to start with? And I think that's probably, going back to the initial question, that is the first thing that people actually, we've always done it that way. Well, why aren't you using the data to resolve the challenges that you've got within your organization? Because the data is there, and everything else is a sticky plaster.
You know what? I've had conversations before when I'm doing coaching with leaders and managers, and often it's in a sense of they're trying to move up the corporate ladder, but they've got a self-limiting belief that they can't get it because they've not got the skills, not got the experience. I think we apply the same self-limiting beliefs to some of the technology that we've got in our own businesses to say, right, our CRM is so bespoke and complex, and nobody could ever recreate it if we started to think about doing it differently. So we just don't bother. It's become that much of a beast. So I think, to your point, Andrew, it's about breaking some of those challenges, some of those disbeliefs that other technologies or better technologies are out there, which kind of stop the conversation full stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nathan Dring's put on the stop list about how we need to stop claiming people are our most important asset while simultaneously barely investing in people development and prioritizing more tech. I think that's a fair point to make. I think we all say we are customer centric, we're customer experience. I think we are people centric, we are employee centric, but then quite often some of our actions and some of our investments don't support that. Would you agree with that comment from Nathan? Andrew, yeah. What's your thoughts?
So for the last 3.5 years, I've been focusing on getting an organization and companies to start to think about what would have been called support services in a contact center. The recruitment, your training, your quality, your WFM, all of these different practices, to actually start to put a new label on them of practices. And so we move away from the old terminologies. I still see people talk about call centers instead of contact centers or engagement centers. And, with the mindset of how we think is really important. The reason I'm saying this is because, I wasn't long at a meeting with a whole bunch of operational leaders who said, the biggest issue we have is middle management. And we've got other people that, we all know who deal with team leaders across the industry, but actually we don't really do an awful lot technology-wise to support the team leaders. So when I look at what can be done, I think there's a whole bunch of capabilities led by agentic that can enable a high degree of integration and automation across all of those different practices. So you get to a point where your recruitment is driven by agentic, which is driven by an AI role play, which is driven by how that goes into training and back into role play later on, that is driven by WFM and your quality analysis, that is giving the team leaders the insights on their desk to be able to understand how their team are performing at any moment in time and to be able to step in. These investments in these tools, we then go and buy, and I think we're seeing this a lot within WFM, and I know one of your previous guests that you had, Gary, was talking about this. Companies are now getting fed up of paying the premiums they pay for these massive great toys when they actually need about 1% of it. And if they took those toys and said, throw them away, we'll take the 1% through a simple build that we can do ourselves, or we can implement with a very simple approach, and then we invest back in the people. Because this isn't a journey that's going to go from no people to 100% automation, from people to 100% automation in one go. We're nowhere near that. And as much as you hear people say AI first, that's an intent. There's nothing wrong with it. We all know that we live in a dirty industry that's going to take a long time to get all of that stuff done. And so what we need is a progressive way to do that. So let's tidy up those practices, get them working first, make the contact center work first. By all means, introduce agentic capabilities and AI capabilities into the contact center to streamline and manage efficiently the contact center. Then over time, progressively start to think about your workflows and demand management upstream and failure demand.
And you know what, I think that has a natural impact on the question that Nathan raises there. Actually, if we start to tackle some of the demand challenges, start to tidy up contact reasons, use technology in a way that's going to actually support more operational efficiency, the downstream impacts of that is lower demand, lower stress, lower cognitive overload and overwhelm for the agent. So it becomes more of it might not be the immediate action in terms of the people improvements that it makes, but it definitely has a downstream impact on how they play into that. We've got a really interesting comment on the same vein as the agentic stream, Andrew, and I'm going to ask, before I bring up in its comment here, is just give us in a few words what you are referencing when you say agentic, because I think we get blindsided a little bit by all of these terms sometimes, as some people might think it means one thing and somebody else might think another. So when you're referencing agentic AI, in your mind, what does that encapsulate?
So there's different ways to think about it, and you'll hear some people, Salesforce is one, where they'll talk about having an agentic agent, and it's singular. And that will be an agent that is able to make decisions. If you talk about Gen AI, you ask it a question, it gives you an answer. It's not really built for enterprise deployment. So companies that do that, like a certain bank, make a terrible mistake in doing that because it's just not capable of reasoning. When you start to think about agentic, it's able to reason, but you still have a lot of hallucinations. If you set it loose on an organization, it will still come up with the wrong answer because it can't do anything but. So the next role of agentic is then to say, well, how do we have agentic act as an agency on my behalf? How do I build enough confidence in agentic to know that when it says something and does something, it's the right thing it's doing? Back to progressive. You need to be able to train the agent to be able to think about the situation correctly and to have the right response to certain situations. That's training. It's no different to training an agent. We're training an agentic model. Now, so agentic is that ability to reason. But then you go one stage beyond there, which is orchestration. Well, if I have more than one agent and I have a master agent that's orchestrating, now I can start to think about the conversation that exists in that team to check and balance each other. So I'm going to do this. No, you can't do that, says the compliance agent, because it's against the rules. Well, I'm going to do this. No, we have an AI ethics policy. You can't do that. If you have a single agent, it will act more autonomously and start to make mistakes. If you have a group of agents, a system where you have an agentic system, then it starts to behave better. Then we move beyond that to say, well, what about if agentic was not such a big, hairy, large language model as we deal with today, but actually was a small language model? And so now you start to deal with an agent that is literally like if you're in a contact center and you go out to a market because you want 10 new agents to come and help with your banking, you'll go to market and you'll find people that are experienced in banking. When they come in, they don't know your business, but they're experienced in banking. And so what you want to then be able to do is to train them on your business. It's the same thinking in agentic. It's the same thinking with a small language model. I bring in someone who has the basic training of what a banking agent does, but then I'm going to train them on that particular business. And as you start to put these together, they act autonomously and you build agency, and that's how you do it.
And it's almost like a skills-based routine for an agentic AI framework, isn't it? Is that each person's got their own set of skills, but they're working more collaboratively together.
I think it's exactly
with that in mind, and Mike, I'm going to come to you first on this one. Ineos made a comment here in terms of how do we see Gen AI, agentic AI fit in with processing technology, but somehow support agents and humans. So I suppose it's that human in the loop process that helps us reimagine engagement centers that require that type of service. How would you respond to Ineos here? And then Andrew, any bills from yourself? So what's your thoughts on that point, Mike?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a really interesting point because I mean, if you look at where we are with AI bots and AI agents today, they don't get measured in the same way that humans get measured. All right, so humans have got KPIs, they've been driven to handle calls in a certain way, but actually bots are given a lot more lenience at this current stage. You know, they're looked at the outcome more than the actual, you know, how long they're actually interaction on. Don't get me wrong, from the person who's paying the bill cares about the amount of interactions, but the actual outcome is still the outcome driven. Being able to give humans more time to actually focus on CX. So we actually are going to go through this, you know, it's an experience evolution that we're going to have in the CX world with AI coming and stepping in, you know, and to Andrew's the point is, you know, bots will be able to take away a lot of that forefront engagement criteria, meaning that the humans can step in to make decisions where needed if the bot can't make a decision. And that technology is there already. You know, again, technology is not the limitation. It's what and how organizations want to use it is where the limitation comes to it. Giving humans more time to actually provide true CX and provide that experience and the outcome, that is where it's going to go. So that's the next sort of step into the whole bot creation. Take away the mundane, you know, which they can absolutely do. So technology is not that restraint, but it's also removing the measurements that we put onto the humans and actually look at what is truly required at that contact center or truly required in that organization. Because like you said, it's not truly just a contact center problem. AI can fit into a lot of these engagement, you know, perspectives.
I think you're right. And I think you touched on something earlier, Andrew, that ties in nicely to Ineos's point there around how does Gen AI and agentic AI support agents to deliver I suppose, a more structured onboarding, training, and safer environment to have conversations that might be more typical of customers. Do you think that lends in nicely to that point around helping us reimagine an engagement center that's driven by an AI support mechanism?
I think it's broader. So what we're going to get to when we have an agentic world, and I don't use the same for Gen AI. Gen AI for me is not technology, should even be considered to touch a contact center. If it is, you're doing the wrong thing. I think what we're trying to think about is decision intelligence. So decision intelligence is you know, it's a bit of a science, but it's essentially being able to say, what if I could collect all of the knowledge, all the thousands of SOPs and manage those effectively, all the interactions and the feedback from those interactions and the learning goes with that, all of the external systems, and build it into this big knowledge thing that we'll call a vector database. The vector database is then my way of being able to look a single set of data. Right now, the challenge you've got in contact centers is that all of the processes, all of the ways of working are built off multiple sets of knowledge. You've got a bit of knowledge over here, a bit over here, and a bit on, you know, lots in people. You need to capture that. Now, the thing that agentic allows us to do, because of various capabilities like vectorization, is to capture that knowledge, multimodal, video, voice, whatever it is, it doesn't matter, into a knowledge, into a system of intelligence. Once you have that as a system of intelligence, you can service that into whatever channel you want. It doesn't matter. So I can service that into an agent to support the agent. I can triage everything coming in and inform that knowledge more about the information that clients are asking questions on. Then I can surface that up to a customer. So I don't talk about chatbots. I talk about being able to surface knowledge up to my customer and have an engagement with the customer. But if I've got this center of intelligence, my channels, which would be an agent, it could be a quality person, it could be a training person, it could be a team leader, it could be a customer, it could be a partner. They all surface the same, their questions all surface the same set of knowledge. You have that knowledge complete, it becomes like a super agent, a super person. So I know that if people ask me a question about AI, I've got enough knowledge to probably be dangerous about it. Imagine that across a contact center within a retail business. I have enough knowledge that I can service a client's inquiry. I can also say, well, actually, I'm not going to deal with that. I'm going to allow that customer to come in and I'm going to put that up to an agent and I'm going to guide that agent because I've got the knowledge to put together a response for that customer, but you have the authority to say yes to it. In that case, I'm going to put it up to an agent. The agent gets it on their desktop. That's fine. Click. I'm okay with that. That's how we need to be thinking. And if we can think like that, then we progressively get to a point where, as that knowledge builds, I'm having a conversation with a utility company at the moment where they said, we love that. Could we build that over time? We've got Kraken here, but could we build that over time? But day one, could we switch on email? Yes, you can switch on email. Let's do email. Let's get that working. We're not fixing the workflow. The workflow is fundamentally broken within the emails. But day one, we're going to take the emails, we're going to triage them, come up with a response, give it to an agent, or simply if someone says, thanks for a wonderful experience, utility company, if you've ever heard that, then we'd say back to then the email from the agentic is, thank you very much, we're glad you enjoyed the service.
And I think if you look at it into another way into that as well, is taking the agentic AI and the AI capabilities, and it's one area that sort of gets missed a lot in the contact center, actually in a lot of industries, is actually the accessibility capability that it brings to humans. So if you have a disability or and you need extra support or capabilities, this is where the AI can actually aid into that as well. So AI and especially agentic, as Andrew outlines, it's helping them make decisions, or taking away those decision points from them, and actually broadening the work capability of bringing further disabilities people into the organizations, or even people with learning needs and difficulties. That means that you don't need to know the ins and outs of the processes and the controls. It allows it as a broader spectrum of people that can work in these industries, and that is probably one of the things that we'll see more change of.
Can I just pick up on one of the questions? And just
go on, and then I want to bring us back to script in a second, but go on.
So Nathan mentioned about people, and Mike, you were just talking about them as well. And I'm at some point I will release a book on servant leadership that I started to write 3 years ago. But the idea is that we do need to recognize the value of people. And someone posted on LinkedIn how agentic and all the new AI is going to change jobs, and it came up with a whole bunch of tech jobs. And it completely missed the business. And actually what we're seeing in the business, and in my previous role, we created and we gave them a term that was interesting, but we identified people in the business who wanted to go on the journey of AI. And suddenly their specialist capabilities, their previous history, their ability to be able to imagine, and I'm all about reimagine. That's why we talk about dream in my business, because I'm all about reimagining the world. But to bring these people in and say, come to work with your imagination. If this process was to be done differently, what would it look like? How can you help to inform that and to guide that knowledge as we start to build out this new world? And suddenly you're taking those very skilled agents that a lot of us have got in our businesses and saying, there is a new route for you. It will be an opportunity to go into another realm. Do you want to come with it? And we take them with us.
I like it. It's almost like laying that foundation of adoption to change in a collaborative way. So I think it works really well. I know that both of you have got your own frameworks and approaches to reimagining and rethinking process design. And Mike, I know you're very much in the realms of consultative CX thinking. So I just wanted to kind of tease some of that out in terms of some of the frameworks that you use to help people start to think differently and start to reimagine different ways of doing things across either people, process, or technology. And Andrew, I know you've got the same. So I want to kind of dig into yours first, Mike, and ask if you wouldn't mind sharing some of that framework with the people that are watching, so that they've got a way to kind of start rethinking and recalibrating what they want to do. And then we'll dig into yours, Mike. So talk me through your methodology, Mike, and your approach.
Absolutely, and both mine and Andrew's sort of harmonized quite nicely as well. So it's a good way of going through it. But basically mine starts off as the 3 W's, all right? And it's all about asking and questioning, all right, and actually embracing the inner child of the whys and the whats and the wheres, all right? The whys, it grounds you, you know, the whats sharpens you, all right, and the wheres strength, you know, stretch you, and you stretch your imagination of what you can do. And this is the problem, is a lot of organizations go in blind into a lot of RFPs, a lot of transitions, a lot of process controls. And these questions are there to actually question it, actually, you know, not even get to the stage of questioning why you're doing it, but, you know, let's go through all of the whys that we can do. So it's very similar to like a you know, if you're looking at a support issue or a fault finding issue, or you've got a bug, ask as many whys as you possibly can until you've exhausted your why list, or you've exhausted your what list and exhausted your where list, so that you are confident and able to stand up and justify why you're actually making those decisions. That is where this foundation comes through. It's basically pushing the boundaries out of their beliefs, their culture, and their current logic, all right, to actually broaden, you know, as Andrew said, like technology is all capable, it's all capable, all there to do. And if you're talking about generative, you're in the wrong perspective. We got talking to generative. It's asking those, why are you doing that? Why are you thinking of this? All right, what is that going to bring benefit? What is your next moves after this? Because a lot of people think of it, they see what's in front of them, they see the problem, the challenge, but they're not seeing 2-3 years down the line. So everything they make that decision now of will have a roll-on impact. So by this foundation, or actually framework, actually allows them to start thinking, right, we know where we are today, so we've got our tactical, we've got our strategic, let's actually create that roadmap and building that roadmap out with the customers based off asking these very simple questions. Again, this is not, it's, you know, I'd like to say it's rocket science. I'd like to say that no one could come up with this, but it's not. It's just logical in the approach of addressing the problem and a challenge and understanding, is that problem always going to be there? What's going to change in the future, and how do we adjust it?
You know what I think is really interesting is we can ask those questions, and I think in some more leading organizations they will ask those questions. But what I think we are guilty of in the contact center is we ask the questions and answer it for ourselves, rather than not allowing us to think and get other input. So it's like, why do we do that? Oh, well, we do that because we've always done this, and because we need to do that because of that, because they don't do that. So we rationalize and we justify the why, rather than allowing that why to just hang for a little bit and let people think about the real why that sits behind it. And you've got a really interesting one in your framework, is why does it matter? And I think that's a really compelling question to say, right, why do we do this, and why does it matter that we do it that way, or why does it matter that we allow for that amount of time and stuff? What's your thoughts on that? Would you agree?
Absolutely. You know, I've been classified as being that child in the back seat of the car and saying, "Are we nearly there? Are we nearly there yet?" And it's always questioning and gaining over it. So someone says, "You know, we do it," and they give you the answer. You go, "But why do you do that?" You know, and it's not being, you know, destructive. It's not trying to be challenging to them, but it's trying to make them think against it. And absolutely, if you answer your own homework, all right, then you're not actually achieving anything. But this is where consultancy went through a stage where it really sort of died off in the industry, because
it was a dirty word.
It was a dirty word, and it was basically everyone's getting misled by it.
Yeah.
And the problem is because there's a lot of influence based off of vendors. And realistically, we're now coming into a new age of technology, a new age of contact centers, and a new age of CX, where actually consultation is needed again, because there is and I'm going to use Andrew's term, there is a lot of noise out there that people can't break through. There's a lot of FOMO. People are jumping on bandwagons. Consultancy is there to ground.
The answer there, what's the question? Is the
exactly, yeah.
Okay, I think I'd like to explore that a little bit further and kind of expand on it with your framework, Andrew, because I think Mike is absolutely right. We need to be in that age of consultative curiosity, I suppose is the phrase there, is to kind of say, right, let's really get to the nuts and bolts of why we do something, understand those processes, challenge those processes. But I think the extension of that is then, how do we start to ideate and innovate outside of those and really challenge thinking? And I think that's where your dream framework starts to play in quite nicely and complement the consultative approach. So tell me a little bit more about what the dream is, if you like.
So it was founded on the idea that noise exists within the business, constraints within the business exist, and that if we were to have an honest Joe conversation around the business and actually what it's there for, when roll back everything that the business looks like today, most businesses are very simple. We want to sell a product to a customer. We want to help a customer with a patient. We want to help a patient. We want a student to get admissions to university. We want someone in a housing association who's homeless to be able to get a house. And then over the years, we layer in all of this complexity into a business on top of itself, and then we bring people in. Now, people have a whole new layer of complexity. Why? I was with someone from an organization the other day whose career is to go around, create reports, and then 6 months later go and do the same report in the same place. They don't want the industry to change. You've got all of these consultants who go with their SOP manuals ready to read them out to the client. They haven't got a clue what they're talking about. I was in the back of a cab with a bunch of people from the consultants a few years ago, and they were young people looking and reading their book to try and figure out how they were going to speak to the client because they didn't have the grounding. You see people on the internet now who are saying, the other day someone put on, another failed AI effort in the graveyard of AI. And I'm like, oh, God's sake, this faith gap is a real problem about how people perceive and think about AI. AI is not the problem. The organizations are. So I said, well, let's dream. I'm a creative person. You can see my keyboard next to me. I'm a creative person by nature. So I immediately move into, well, what if? What if the constraints weren't there? What if the noise wasn't there? And let's call it dream. And so dream stands for discovery, reimagine, educate, apply, and mobilize. And so the first stage is discovery, which is let's get out of people's heads where they are today. Just tell us, how do you feel about the business? How do you feel it is out of 10? And how do you feel it could be? Where would you like to be aspirationally? And then where would you see yourselves if you do nothing? These are good questions, right? And then have some questions linked across. And we look across people, organization, regulation, customer, executive, and so forth. And we create those lenses of responses from people that gets a moment in time. And then I synthesize those. I have an AI program, surprise, surprise, that takes all of these, synthesizes them together and comes up with a single view as to how your organization thinks about itself. And then we go into the workshop. And when we present that and we say, right now it's gone. And then we put a pound box in the middle of the table. If you say a constraint in this session, you put a pound in. If you mention technology, you put a pound in. And then we do a workshop for the next 4 hours about reimagining. Imagine that, Gary. Imagine no constraints. But what we do is we say there are no constraints because I want you to believe that with technology as it is today, we can truly achieve the output that you want to get to in your business. And so I was up in Warrington doing one recently, and the energy in the room is palpable because people they're not constrained anymore. And these people are brilliant at their job. They're brilliant at what they do, but they're constrained in their thinking. Well, unconstrain it. And it's like going from an old house and being able to see the beauty of what that house could be and being on that journey of transforming it in the room until you end up with that thing on the right. Now, the problem, I call that the Indian Paint Festival. At the end of that, your light is on in the room. Everyone's super excited, right? And so that's the first part of dream is let's reimagine what your world could look like. And then we take a right to left view that says, okay, we want to get there, but we're gray on the left. We're not in the paint festival today. And so you have to then go back and say, well, what are the constraints that are stopping us getting there? That's the right to left journey. So within my business, there are constraints, things that I can't do. Is that a constraint? Well, no, not really. Get rid of it. It's not a constraint. And eventually you work through, and there might be, instead of 100 constraints, there might be 5 that are stopping you getting through to your dream. And then we go left to right again. So now we're forming our plan. Having said that these are the constraints, we know our endpoint, we know the constraints we're going to deal with. How do we go from here now and take that forward into a plan? And then during the workshop, I wasn't expecting this, but the client turned around and said, could you draw this on the wall? Could you draw our future model, our solution?
On the wall. I'd love to grab a nice big wall board behind.
And so I did. So I went up there and I said, this is how you need to think. And we talked about the layer of intelligence and how all the channels can work and how you can build your workflows start to front. But we did it on an actor journey that is utopian. Actually, this is what your customer coming in or your patient, they want to experience this journey. And how do your actors in your business interact with those? And by the way, this is doable. We can build this today and we're doing it for people. I can give you endless examples of where this agentic capability is working. Don't let someone say to you, it's not working. It damn well is. It's all out there. We're building this stuff every day. And so the software then captures all of this nuggets that I've built. So within the workshop, and then it condenses it and synthesizes it all together and gives you a really nice output at the end that you can take and build. And that's Dream.
And you know what I think? I mean, it's a brilliant model, and I think it's a really collaborative way of getting people to think about what the art of the possible is. But the reality of it is, in a lot of contact centers and in a lot of senior leadership teams, it's not happening in that same way. What do you think? And Mike, I'll ask this of you first. Is what do you think are some of those limiting factors that are stopping us from approaching some of these conversations and almost removing the need, if you will, of having someone like Andrew or yourself or me coming in and saying, right, let's run these sessions. Why aren't they happening natively in the contact center right now? What do you think's holding people back?
I'd say probably the biggest one is fear. All right, you know, if you look at the sort of the cultural elements of it, you know, Andrew highlighted it brilliantly. Forget everything, you know, but it's the fear of what management, their jobs, you know, by stepping outside of the norm is what holds everyone back. You know, as they always used to say, no one ever used to get fired for buying Cisco. No one ever got fired for buying NICE. You know, it's what decisions you make influence where you are. Yeah, other vendors are available. You know, I should probably state that as well. But no one ever used to get fired or got questioned or hammered about it. And this is what's caused this culture of streamline, and this is probably bad behavior is where it's got into that. So trying to break that, and as to Andrew's point, you know, trying to reimagine the color of what it could be instead of the gray and the norm and the FOMO that everyone else has followed because you just followed the same path as everyone else. Just think what you could be and where you could get to. But I think the biggest one there is fear. You know, I don't think people don't do things just because they think that's or you know, there could also be laziness into this mix as well because they've also taken the slimpest route to it. But I'd say probably more it's the fear factors of decision making.
Is it fear of changes to the status quo? Do you think the comfort factor and the where we are now is and the current knowns rather than the unknowns is what holding people back, or what's your view? I
agree that fear is a big part of this, Mike. I do agree. I think the executive is a huge part of this right now. I think CTOs, CDOs need to take a really good, careful look at what they think AI is because they don't get it. And I've been in front of many over the last few months. And the number of glazed eyes I get of that team who should know better. They can't describe what agentic is. They should know. They've got a duty of care to their businesses and they can't describe it. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable when a person in a room says, Andrew, can you show me how this can work when their CDO is in the room? And I said, well, your CDO's here. He can show you. No, I want you to show me because they know he doesn't know. I think that's shocking. So I think people need to look at the quality of people they have in their organization. I think the CEO needs to, you know, everyone's very quick to talk about AI ethics, but nobody's actually keen to understand, well, how can it truly deal with us? So they put in little pilots that fail because they're not driven enough. Someone just put on here, what if the dream is 100% self-service and zero need for human support, right? I think we're answering that question because that's the fear you're talking about, right? And the reality is, with some organizations, that might be the case, but not day one. They might want to get there. And there's the wonderful Elon Musk, I think, once said the best process is no process. I talk about the best collection is no collection. What if we could build a propensity model where there are no collections? Imagine the number of people doing that today that wouldn't have a job. Well, we can get to that because we can start to have a propensity model that shows when people are going to lapse. You know, and so you can do things in a radically different way. But the way that you get to that 100% self-service, in the reality is it's an ambition, but it's not ever going to be achieved. And so the fear is misfounded. What we need to do is step through the process. And as we step through each part of that user journey, there will be a decision tree that says, a decision statement that says, I'm here today, 100% people. Where do I want to be in a year's time? Do I want to be 100% AI? Do I want to be AI guided? Or do I want it to be people still? And as you step through each of these processes, you'll end up with a roadmap that says, I've now got ambition. Here, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go here. And you set a slider that says, this month, we're going to try a bit more. And then we automate a little bit more. Once we've proven it, we go for it. Once we prove it, we go for it. So Dream can go to 100% self-service. It's unlikely to, but the fear and the lack of vision right now for me, the lack of vision in organizations. And here's the crux, and I'll shut up. The crux of this is right now is that organizations, if you don't recognize what's going on right now, then you're out of touch. We are in a singularity with AI. There is no, it's another thing that's going to fail. It's not going to fail. It's here and it's going somewhere very fast. And the companies that are embracing it, guess what's happening to those people? They're getting promoted. The people that are going with the agentic models and getting them working are now the CEOs, CAIOs in the businesses that those companies were going into. So people need to get on the bandwagon of AI and start to understand what it is and how agentic truly works. Because in a year's time, it's not going to be agentic, it's going to be AGI. And that's a whole different thing. And if we're not on the bandwagon now of understanding this, when that happens, we're on a whole different bandwagon. Within a year, there will be organizations that won't even use a keyboard. They're just going to be using voice. Get that into your head. That's incredible.
And I think you've touched on a really interesting point there, Andrew. And I'm going to come to you with this, Mike. It's about people and what are the, I suppose, the skills, behaviors and mindsets that are going to matter, to Andrew's point, maybe in the next 12 months, 2 years. And how do we start thinking about how we recruit for those today? How do we nurture the people that are internally that might be a little bit nervous about leaning into those types of skills and learning those things and maybe even fearful for the job? So how do we reimagine the process for people and get an understanding of where they're at on the journey and if they're still the right fit for us for the next 1 to 2 years?
Do you know, this is a really good, because I actually had the same conversation this morning with a company that is going through that transformational stage of who owns this, how do I actually evolve it because of the restrictions in it. And and a good colleague and a good friend of mine came up with it's the curious person. So if you've got a skill, it's curiosity. Okay, because they are actually able to go and think differently. They're not bound. It's someone that has got the energy and the will to break boundaries and borders and rules and regulations. Well, not so much the regulations, because of course they don't want to get fines, but more perspective of the company basis. But it's willing then to push their CTOs, their CEOs, their controlling the board to actually say, we are doing it wrong, and it's okay to be wrong, but now we've got to do it right. So the biggest skill I think over the next is curiosity. All right, you could have, you could say someone, I'll be a prompt engineer, but to be fair, in probably saying, as Andrew was saying, in the next 12 months, you won't need to write prompts. You'll just talk to it and it will do it for you. So these skills are now, they're the here and the now. The future ones are the people that are going to really benefit from it. And 100% to Andrew's point, I think it's brilliant. To get promoted are going to be the curiosity ones that are looking at the next stage.
100%. And that comes back to fear though, Mike. There are people in the business that are so scared to put themselves in the pot that they're holding back, and they'll be the ones that lose out. The best people that are going to succeed are the curious, 100%. And the creative. This is the time for creative.
It is, and this is what's going to help evolve the technology even faster, and the demand, because that's what drives it. And again, what do we actually want it to do? How do we want it to act? Those curiosity, the imaginative ones, the ones that actually want to push those boundaries of where it is and where it's going to, will actually drive the future. And the horizon on this is so vast and vague. There is no limit, and as you said the other day, there is no limit on this, and we shouldn't limit ourselves on that functionality. And I think this is where, if I could, even though we're talking about contact centers, if you could actually talk to the vendors, because the vendors drive a lot of this behavior and the ways forward, if you could take that and actually run that same process with a vendor, what would they change and how would they operate to the actual contact centers that then believe what they say? So is where, and again, I'm going to come back to it, that's where consultancy comes into it.
And one more thing on
that curiosity piece there with Chris Holt, embracing curiosity from across the business is where you'll find innovation and future leaders. And I think Chris is doing that with lots of different tech. If you follow Chris's YouTube, he's got lots of innovative ideas. But Andrew, I've got a question for you on that. I suppose that reimagining and that transformation piece, which is we've got a shed ton of contact centers. I mean, there's 7,500 contact centers thereabouts in the UK. If you amplify that up across the globe, there's tons more. But there'll be a lot of those that are still in clunky, on-premise, legacy solutions that they're still bound by. If you're sitting down with a CEO of one of those businesses, and they are so wrapped up in legacy turmoil that they don't know what to do, what's your advice to them in terms of helping them embrace the dream?
It's not a restriction. It's not a constraint. Being on not a problem. I put a pound in the book. Yeah, absolutely. So here's the thing, right? People look and say, I'm so far back I can't get to the front, and they can't see above the crowd that's in front of them, right? They can. And, they can literally put a trampoline there and jump over everyone. If you go to Saudi Arabia right now, there's a Trump with his AWS policy suddenly said I can read everything that's on AWS and nobody can stop me, and he's put it in law. And now in Saudi Arabia and other parts of the Middle East, they're taking out AWS and saying I'm not going to do it unless it's on my premises. And so the nice thing, so they have a contact center capabilities that are on-prem, which exist, by the way. And because you're using small language models, guess what? A small language model doesn't need to be outside anymore. It's edge technology. You can literally host it within a Docker on your own AWS instance that's in your account, or a Vercel, or whatever kind of internal cloud platform you're using. You host it in there. It never goes external, Gary. It's all of the knowledge that you need to be able to operate is internal. You get the best of AI without going out and dealing with any of the complexity LLMs in the market. It all works. And so you can literally go from zero to hero if you're just able to be curious and to want to go there. There's nothing constraining you.
Yeah. And I think some of the constraints, and to put a pound in the box, some of the constraints stem from poorly defined processes, poorly defined knowledge bases. So, Mike, I've got a question for you here on kind of process transformation. And I suppose it's what do we think contact centers need to do about their processes to help them serve customers or colleagues better in a more agentic, more AI-driven world?
And it's all down to knowledge. All right, and it's the knowledge articles and actually writing this stuff down and actually getting it into a constructive manner, a structured way of actually being able to surface that as well. So, I mean, lots of organizations has lots of data. We went through the whole phase of big data and pretty much everyone got blown away with having too much data and now they don't know what to do with it. It's actually utilizing that data, utilizing the knowledge, and to Andrew's point from earlier, getting the knowledge out of people's heads that have been in the organization, getting it into a structured format that then is bot ready so that it can be utilized to onboard, to help speed up, engagements, but also getting that out as a self-service functionalities to customers to remove that friction. Why do they even need to talk to us? The information's there. They don't need to talk to Bill because he knows it. It's up on the website. So getting it structured is the key to this, and this is the problem. They have a lot of unstructured data and or scattered data, to the points earlier. Centralizing this data into a point where it's accessible, usable, and readable, all right, is key. And let's get rid of the stuff that you don't need. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of hoarders in there of data that is just not necessary, or they don't use to actually make data-driven decisions. That is where, unfortunately, AI will step in. That makes data-driven decisions. That's exactly how it operates, and that's why in one ways it can take away the emotional elements from the humans around decisions. But you're still going to need that human element in there because there's always going to be decisions. But if you can give that same information to humans, away you go.
You know what? And we vilify AI in more ways than we do our agents. We give AI a harder time than we do an agent in terms of the level of quality. If an AI makes a mistake, everybody's up in arms saying, "Oh, the AI's made a mistake." If an agent makes a mistake, we gave them an 85% quality threshold anyway. So, what's your thoughts in that, Andrew, in terms of people, I suppose, lessening the expectation that AI has to be 100% flawless, otherwise we can't use it?
I did some email automation with a client not long ago, and the head of customer for the client, the chief operations director, she said, I said, what are you saying for? She said, that email, I wish that my human agents could write an email like that every time, because it was able to understand why people were writing. The EQ was brilliant. If you put a person in a contact center and they write 20 emails, by the time they get to the 5th one, they're bored. AI doesn't get bored. It does the same. And so we can be consistent with AI, but you need to hold it to account. There are a set of SLAs that we've established within the AI world. That still gets applied into your quality framework the same way. It might be a different standing, but it still gets applied in the same way and measured. And you will need to train the same way you train human agents. You'll need to train, but that's an acceptable thing to do if we come at recognizing that all of these things are coming at the table for the good of your customers, and therefore we'll get the accuracy up. But if you can have a bot that gives you high accuracy, but you don't turn it on, you don't give it agency day one. You give it agency once you're confident it can do the job, and then you turn it on. Until then,
as you would as you onboard a new employee.
Exactly like that. Imagine putting them on a contact center. You put them into a huddle for a week and have them work together on calls and learn from each other. It's the same thing. Once you're happy that they can do it, you turn the lever up and you put them to agency on the bits that you want. Other than that, you serve it up to an agent. And I think this thing about knowledge, just to pick up on what Mike said as well, and I agree with everything you said, Mike, but I would say that Agentic is expert at unstructured data. That's where it stands out. So in a supply chain environment that we've been looking at, 1,000 suppliers, you build out that detail. I guarantee Agentic will spot links between each of those suppliers that you could never see as a human. And so the way of actually assessing and reading data with Agentic is radically different to the way that we think as humans. And what we try and do is constrain an Agentic agent into the way that we think about knowledge. Tomorrow, even tomorrow, and I mean literally tomorrow, you could turn off every knowledge system in the country and replace it with an Agentic platform, and it will be a gazillion times better than any of the knowledge platforms, any of the WFM platforms, any of the WFO platforms. If you think about the way that the contact center reference architecture changes, all of the traditional platforms, I know you had someone not long ago talk the same as this, everyone will go tomorrow. There will be none of that tomorrow. You don't need it.
You need to have a chat with Jimmy Hosang.
I
just want to round off for the last minute and a half or so that we've got. It's just thinking, actually, if we fast forward to 2029, what do we think a contact center that's maybe embracing Dream and embracing that consultative CX approach would look like? Mike, I'm going to start with you, and then Andrew, I'm going to get your thoughts. So we're in 2029. What's an organization looking like that's embracing these things?
Well, they're ahead of their competitors. I mean, that's straight out, and they're creating that elevation to a whole new experience. They're actually caring about their customers. They're actually looking at where their customers want and delivering to it. And they're forward thinking. So they're not even thinking in 2029 now. They're in 2035. And that next step, they're already progressing across that, and their competitors are chasing them. And that's the difference. That's really where the alterations are going to come from.
And Andrew, what's your thoughts there? What are contact centers in 2029 looking like they're embracing this?
I don't think it's the contact center. I think it's the enterprise. So I think that we're going to see a new breed of enterprise come in that will completely undermine everything that's in the market. Within the next 18 months, we're going to have AGI. We're going to have sentient computers, as near to sentient as we can imagine, that can understand a stream of thought the way that you and I can assess it. The whole world is going to change. The reality is that a lot of the people, and I wrote this in my predictions for the year on my LinkedIn earlier in the year, a lot of people are going to be on the steam train, not the express. And I think, Mike, to your point, there's going to be people that are going to be so far ahead and others wishing they could get there. And at that point, they won't get there because the jump is going to be too big. And so people need to start to believe and imagine and be creative now, or there is no future for them.
Yeah.
The singularity is here. I mean, we can't get away from it now. That is here.
I mean, there's been some brilliant quotes that I've taken from this that I can kind of reflect back on after that. I mean, we've got experience evolution, we've got decision intelligence, we've got multimodal vectorized databases. There's all sorts of stuff in here that I think are words from the Terminator that we're talking about now, which is awesome. But we have reached the top of the hour, and I could go on for a lot longer. We have more questions that I would have loved to have gotten into, but we had some really good discussion there, and there's some really practical stuff. If people want to get hold of you, Mike, or you, Andrew, what's the best place for people to get hold of them for you, Mike?
Via LinkedIn, or they can reach my website, so acaciaconsultants.co.uk, or email me, mike.gale@acaciaconsultants.co.uk.
And Andrew?
Again, via my LinkedIn at Andrew Hall, via athenta.com, or via andrew.hall@athenta.com. Brilliant.
Well, I've got one last ask of everybody as part of this. Is you'll notice that there's a little book going live on Sunday the 1st, which is 5 years of summarizing all of the great conversations that we've had here with some practical missions and tips. So if you have enjoyed this today, you'll have enjoyed the last 5 years. So get along to amazon.com or amazon.co.uk and get yourself a copy, because all proceeds go to the mental health charity Mind. So it's all for a good cause, and it's a very, very good read, if I do say so myself. But with that said, I'm going to say thank you very much. I'm just going to ask Mike and Andrew just to stop on for 60 seconds more, but we'll see everybody else next month, where we've got I think it's Rob Dermott and Sue Reed, and we're going to be talking about the next wave of skills that are needed for the contact center. So join us in March for the next wave. So take care, and I'll see you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.